start with the opening recitations. If you know the recitations, yes, please join us. If you don't know the recitation, it is sufficient to just establish presence, presence of mind, and then let body and mind settle, and then listen to the recitation. Let the words kind of enter your heart. Let the words just kind of naturally come. Don't try too hard, or at all even, to try to figure out what these words mean. But do maintain presence so that when you hear the words, whatever they evoke, whatever they bring up, just be present for that. Yeah? All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. O Mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All Mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. Thus, until I achieve awakening, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. May all Mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all Mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all Mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Now let your body and mind settle into their own places. Trust that both body and mind have the ability to find their own places of quiet, their own places of rest, their own places of ease, as long as we, with our agendas, our plans, our hopes, and our fears, get out of the way. So right now, just get out of the way and trust that body and mind will find their own places. And where they will find that place is right here, is right now. It's on this seat. In this room, in this house, in the part of neighborhood that the house is in, right there, body and mind, both present as one. Breathe in, breathe out. If you know the 4 considerations, the 4 mind reversals, now is the time to recall those points of reference, so that at least for the duration of this guided meditation, you can say to all distractions, no. A firm and clear no is sufficient. The 4 mind reversals, or the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, or the 4 considerations, it's basically saying no to distractions. Distractions that lead us down pathways of confusion and suffering. Distractions that in the short term can sound very convincing that they need our attention. But if we already give them our attention most of our waking hours, so now it's okay to say no to them for just a mere few minutes. This is the gist of the first point of the 7-point Lojong, which is to begin with the preliminaries that will steer us away from distractions, so that we can establish undistracted, uninterrupted, unending presence on the seat, in the room that you are in, which is in that part of the house, that part of the neighborhood, that part of the country, that part of the world, that specific spot in the universe. Take your place. Do not abdicate your place, but take your place. Be seated on the seat of compassion, and let clarity of mind, also known as wisdom, shine forth. Seated on the seat of compassion, let wisdom shine forth. Whenever you are ready with this confidence that you are seated on the seat of love and compassion, and the nature of your mind is this indestructible wisdom that pervades all directions. With this confidence, whenever you're ready, you can start bringing your attention to flow together with breath. Breathe in, and out. Note 1. Breathe in and out. Note 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. Up until 21. And then when you're ready again, you can start again until 21 and start again. Whenever you're lost, be it at 7 or 9 or 18, just go back to 1. For this is not a competition. This is just a useful method for us to again and again come back to undistracted presence by anchoring this presence on breath, on the coming and going of breath, of the rising and ceasing of breath, breath being the most basic property of this body. Breathe in, breathe out, 1. Breathe in, breathe out, 2. Continuing to anchor your attention on the rising and ceasing of breath, of the coming and going of breath. Remember that all phenomena should be regarded as dreamlike. And recognize the nature of awareness, which is characterized as birthless. And know that even the antidote, know that even what we're applying to free ourselves from being dragged around by experiences, by emotions, by thoughts, even the method to do that can be released as well as all three, the subject, the object, and the action, are all interdependently arising and therefore empty and therefore dreamlike. Once you have a taste of this, once you have an experience of this, then you can simply let mind settle in that state, in that experience, which is the settling in the basic state or the alaya state, which is the essence of practicing absolute bodhicitta. The first of the two trainings in the second point of the 7-point mind training. Once you are able to settle into this nature of your mind, into this essence of your mind, into this basic state, that all phenomena has no hold on you, and you are free. Free from being dragged around by thoughts, free from being dragged around by emotions, free from being dragged around by experiences, by opinions, by yes and no's, this and that. Once you are freed from that, you rest in that state of freedom and habituate the resting in this state of freedom. All experiences, all phenomena are fundamentally without essence, appearing only due to interdependent arising conditions and causes, and therefore they have no reality beyond the interplay of causes and conditions that exist from moment to moment. So in any moment, it's possible to break through, to jailbreak this cycle, the cycle of confusion. Recognize each moment as simply a moment that interdependently arise, interdependently it will cease. As long as we do not fixate and get stuck with that which is not real, but instead being present at each moment as each moment arises and ceases. Simply be present at each moment. Rest in that experience of the absolute bodhicitta. Resting here does not mean not having awareness. Resting here means that awareness is bright, radiant, unmoving, present, and all-pervading. Awareness is empty and yet all-pervasive. The second of the two trainings under the second point the training in Bodhicitta. The second part is the training in relative Bodhicitta. Relative Bodhicitta consists of 3 elements. Maitri, often translated as loving kindness. Karuna, often translated as compassion. And Bodhicitta, in this case, the resolve to achieve the state of Buddha for the benefit of all beings. This resolve has to have love and compassion as its driving force. Out of love and compassion for all sentient beings, we are motivated, we are driven to the task of achieving state of Buddha for the benefit of all beings. So for bodhicitta, for relative bodhicitta, for this resolve to be authentic, to be pure, we have to begin, we have to ground it in love and compassion. Maitri, or love, or kindness, or loving kindness, or friendliness. It is explained as that feeling that we get whenever we see a child playing happily, especially if it is our own child, and we see him or her playing happily. In that moment, we experience friendliness, loving kindness, which is this spontaneous outpouring of a wish for the other person's happiness and for them to obtain as well the causes of happiness. So this is what we give, this is what we send. Tonglen is to take and to give. What we give is our love. So all the happiness that we have experienced before, all the kindness that we have received before in our life, on the basis of recognizing how liberating, how freeing, how naturally wonderful it is to experience that, recognizing that, we now share it with all beings everywhere. May they too experience this kindness, experience this happiness. May they too be able to feel the warmth of Maitri. This is what we send, this is what we give. And when we take, we are taking with compassion, which is the desire for the other to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So we take, we want to take away their pain and suffering. We don't mind being inconvenienced. That is a very simple way of understanding what it means to have compassion, which is a fearlessness, lack of hesitancy in being inconvenienced by other people's problems and other people's suffering. We can develop this, even if this does not yet come so easily. We can develop this because the seed of this is already present within us. So whenever we see someone suffering, before we even recognize who this person is, it does not matter whatsoever. Instantly, we have the seed of karuna, which is wanting to free that person from suffering and the causes of suffering. Unfortunately, when we recognize who that person is, then we might hesitate because we don't really know that person. Then we start measuring, is this a risk? Is this not a risk? But if we train to see all beings as identical with our own mother in this lifetime, then we shall not hesitate, and we will not hesitate. And this is the taking. Dong is to give. Len is to take. We give with love and friendliness, and we take with compassion and kindness. And we give and we take all within the basic state of the mind, the state of freedom from all illusory experiences, phenomena coming and going without essence. Seated on this seat of love and compassion, let the clarity and radiance of wisdom shine forth. And in an indivisible, united way, we practice both absolute and relative bodhicitta without needing necessarily to divide them. Within this one session, you can move from counting breath to reflecting on kindness and compassion, tapping into what that feels like, and then once recognizing that, extending that love and that compassion to all beings. And continue, breathe in, breathe out, rising, falling, arising, ceasing. Like a dream, like a mirage, like a magic show, like a movie. Vividly appearing, vividly clear, and yet lacking in substance. Reality is dynamic. Confusion is stuck. And if we are stuck with an idea of reality, then we are still stuck. Therefore, do not fixate on even the teachings. They are not truths to be debated or defended, but they are fingers pointing to the truth so that we can experience directly reality as it is. So relate to the lines in the second point of the 7-point Lojong, and in fact relate to all the lines in this spirit, in this understanding, with this spirit, with this understanding. That the Buddha Dharma is the Dharma that transforms us into Buddhas. It's the methods of waking up, of becoming Buddha, and nothing else. Not something to be argued, not something to be proven to others, not something to debate with others, but tools for us to be free from entanglements, free from a thicket of views. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Let's see if there's any questions regarding this practice, this training in the two bodhicittas. Observations. Yes, no, no. If not, then we take a very quick break and then we will start with the lines in point number 6 of the 7-point Mahayana Lojong. You know, we're going through those lines now. Yeah. So we'll be right back. So last week, we began this section, the 6th point in the 7-point Lojong. So under the 6th point is what's known as the commitments or the samayas. So samaya has a particular distinctive kind of meaning as well as all-encompassing in some ways. But samaya is often a term that you will come across when you are dealing with what's known as the Vajrayana level of the Buddha's teachings. So in Tibetan Buddhism, it is often, practitioners are often reminded that when you practice the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, the best way to practice is to practice by combining what's known as the 3 vehicles, the individual vehicle, universal vehicle, and the indestructible or adamantine vehicle. So respectively known in Sanskrit as the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. Just as a footnote, I always emphasize that I think it's a mistake when we arbitrarily replace Hinayana with Theravada. To me, Theravada is a separate, distinctive form of Buddhism that has developed, for the last 1,000 to 1,500 years, primarily in Sri Lanka. And then from there, it spread to other parts of Southeast Asia. So that's its own Buddhist tradition. In that tradition, nowhere in their text is there any word called Hinayana or Mahayana. And of course, nowhere in their collection of scriptures is there any mention of Vajrayana. These terms are just completely irrelevant to them. Yeah. Then in the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, which it received from northern India, these terms exist. And although these terms, Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, historically had particular reference, they were used by this group to identify that group, or sometimes to identify themselves vis-a-vis other groups. Yeah. But what happened is that in late Indian Buddhism, the Buddhist tradition that developed in Nalanda University, one of the greatest centers of learning in the world, which of course at the heart is Buddhist studies, Buddhist teachings and philosophy. There, the Nalanda masters kind of very skillfully, took all these kind of differences and debates and came up with a holistic, a comprehensive approach to all these different teachings. And from there emerged the understanding that, in fact, Buddha's teachings can be divided into what's called Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And the best way is not to say, oh, I only do this, I don't do that. And I do that, and I don't do this. And I accept this, I don't accept that. And I accept that, and don't accept this. Right? Instead, the Nalanda approach is a comprehensive approach that says, for a person to have the best chance of waking up or becoming Buddha in one lifetime, all 3 are necessary. So this is a long footnote, yeah? But I think it's a necessary footnote because there's still a lot of confusion. Primarily, it's when we see one set of terms used over here and we try to map it over there. Sometimes it's good, and a lot of times it's good, yeah, making connections. But unknowingly, sometimes the wrong connections are being made, and then it skews our understanding of how these terms should be used within each tradition. So, limiting myself now to the tradition that we now call Tibetan Buddhism, although, there are, Inner Mongolia practices this form, and I'm not sure if they like us calling it Tibetan. The Bhutanese practice this form, I'm not sure if they will call it Tibetan Buddhism, so just be aware. Generally, we call it Tibetan Buddhism. One justification for that would be the canonical language is classical Tibetan. Yeah. So whether it's in Mongolia or in Bhutan and Kalmykia, this other country, it's the canonical language is classical Tibetan. Yeah. So anyway, within Tibetan Buddhism, taking this comprehensive approach, Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Now, the Lojong tradition is called the Mahayana Lojong. Here, what Mahayana means here is the universal approach, often translated as great vehicle. But what's great about it is the great motivation, which is the universal motivation, which is the motivation to not only seek our own peace, seek our own release, seek our own freedom, seek our own happiness, but to understand and to appreciate, and therefore to reorientate our motivation from self, from a limited one, to a great, unlimited, universal one, which is to see that our happiness and our freedom is inextricably tied with that of all beings. And hence it's called Mahayana. And calling itself the Mahayana Lojong, which is the Mahayana mind training, which is training our little confused monkey mind so that it can become the universal, the great mind, the great motivation, the great resolve, which is here called Mahayana. So this is not about sectarian differences. This is not arguing for, my form of Buddhism is greater than your form of Buddhism. This is for developing the bigger motivation so that we're not just, overwhelmed by our own limited little claustrophobic self. Seeing that, in fact, the very root of our dissatisfaction is being limited by that notion of self. And then to break us free from that tightness, to break us free from that entanglement, we train in the Mahayana. So this 6th point, it's called Samaya. And as I said, Samaya often you find in more explicitly Vajrayana material. So here it turns up because the author of this text wants to show us that actually it doesn't matter whether you're practicing Hinayana or Mahayana or Vajrayana or all three together. The notion of commitment, which is what Samaya means. Samaya has the dual meaning, both meanings are there, of commitment and be bound by. To be bound by. So often to be bound or bondage is negative, right, in Buddhist material. But here it's a positive notion of to be bound in the sense of to be protected. To be protected. It's that sense of like being bound. Like within the boundaries. To be kept within the boundaries of safety. Here is to keep within the boundaries of protecting the Mahayana motivation. The greater motivation, the universal motivation. So if we want to train from the petty little mind the small definition of self into the great definition of self, into the universal perspective, then we should observe this set of commitments so that we do not fall away from the commitment to the universal liberation and freedom of all beings. And so this set of injunctions, this set of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, often stated in the negative, because if we do the following things, it will damage our commitment. So here it starts by talking about, right, the first line here, which we covered last week already. Quickly, it's train always in the 3 basic points, right? So you can go back to last week's recording. We have it on the YouTube channel called Drikung Dharma Kirti, Circle YouTube channel. So maybe Fabiola can share that if maybe she's already done that on Facebook and on. So in case you just started watching, and so the 3 basic points, always train in that. Then, as you train in the 3 basic points, understand that this is what this training is. It's about changing your attitude. It's not about changing how you look outside. It's not that, oh, now I'm doing this, I need to have short hair. Or, oh, now I'm doing this, I need to have long hair. Oh, now I'm doing this, I need to wear this. Oh, now I'm doing this, I'm not going to wear that. It's also saying it's your attitude that matters. So sometimes Lojong literally is training the mind. Lo is the mind, the ordinary monkey mind. Zhong is to train, to discipline. It has some of that sense, to train, to discipline. But sometimes, maybe in a more evocative way, it's been translated as changing one's attitude. So this is about changing our attitude. So here a reminder, here we are changing our attitude. We are training our attitude, not how we kind of, move around in the world, So don't let your Lojong practice inconvenience other people. As important and as precious and as helpful Lojong practice is, don't make it other people's problems. So this is a good reminder. Sometimes when we have found something new, we get so excited. Then we think everybody should follow the same thing. And in fact, it's incumbent upon me to raise other people's awareness. This is, something that I think it's a certain kind of proselytization, whether it's religion or whatever it is, whatever cause we are really into. There's this sense that we have to raise awareness. In the Lojong way, actually, it says, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Again and again, it will say, no witnessing. No knocking on doors and asking people whether they want to hear the good news or not. Nothing like that. The next 2 we also covered. These seem to go like a pair, two by two. So on the one hand, don't expose others' weak limbs. So here in the commentary, it says, whether it's like people's physical weakness, don't exploit that. Hmm? Don't make fun of that. And don't take for granted that your abilities is status quo. And other people not having those abilities, oh, there's something that they are at fault. Even that, don't do that. Then the commentary also says, don't expose other people's not just physical weakness, but spiritual weakness. Don't say, oh, that person, has such a negative mind, and telling other people, exposing in that sense. Don't do that. As well, don't dwell on others' affairs. So here in the commentary, don't dwell on others' affairs. More specifically, it's others' shortcomings. And here in particular, the commentary says, especially those whom you recognize are on the spiritual path. We have this habit, of judging spiritually inclined people more harshly. It says, no, try to remember, everyone is trying their best. Everyone is trying their best. Actually, it doesn't matter if they are or they are not. You should have that attitude. It actually says in the commentary, look, here we're talking about training the mind. And you know what? It's not training other people's mind, training your own mind. Yeah. So in terms of training your own mind, dwelling on other people's shortcomings, dwelling on how this or that person fell short of the spiritual ideal that they are teaching or they are saying that they're practicing, all of that is a waste of your time. Because that doesn't help you at all to train your own mind. If anything, it feeds your arrogance and it feeds your judgmental mind. So here it says, I'll read to you. It says, it is inappropriate to ruminate about the shortcomings of beings in general, and particularly of those who have entered the spiritual path or the monastic order, especially if they are your fellow practitioners. At the least, you should be joyful toward them, for you are training your mind. Even if you happen to feel that certain associations may be inappropriate. So he's quite practical. He says, even if, of course, you are like, you are all around this one teacher or you're all around this one group, and you kind of feel like, I should not associate with those because, they don't do their practice. They're always goofing around or, they're hanging around the teacher just for entertainment. Okay, he says, even if you recognize that or you feel that way, since you are training your mind, occupying yourself with others' shortcoming is inappropriate. And then it says, and if you happen to lose control and find yourself thinking about the other person's shortcoming, immediately turn it around and say, and what about me? That flaw that I see over there, is it in myself? With regards to others, always remember, they too are Buddhists. And so I'm not going to say, because I'm not going to claim like Lojong is going to make you successful in the world. I'm not advocating Lojong as a substitution for political involvement, for, kind of being a good citizen. I think that, is not my department. You all have to decide that yourself. Speaking strictly from the perspective of, if you're training your mind, these are the injunctions, these are the commitments that they're telling us that we should take to heart. Then overcome the stronger kleshas first. So overcome the stronger kleshas. What are kleshas? Kleshas are destructive emotions, sometimes often translated as afflictive emotions. They are afflictive, they are destructive. They cause us pain. So here it says, you start with the strongest ones, the most destructive ones, because they are the most obvious. They're the easiest for us to see. The fact that you recognize it to be the strongest of the destructive emotions that you often, right, get caught up in, tells you, that is what usually drags you around. So work on getting rid of that first. And so you have to see yourself. What is the strongest of the afflictive emotions, Where do you always get hooked? See that hook. Cut it. It says all your practices should be geared towards undermining that particular destructive emotion. So if it is jealousy, that gets you into trouble the most, direct all your energies to cutting that. If it is, anger, then direct all your energies there. If it is possessiveness, you need to control all the situations, control everything, control everyone. Cut that. Work on cutting that first. So this is counter to the feeling of maybe, I'll work on the lesser things first. But the lesser things are not bringing you so much problems, Ultimately, of course, we purify all of it. We remove all of that. But it says here, start with that which is strongest. Because it's easy to identify. We might not like to admit, but like 12 steps, first step is to recognize I have a problem. Then abandon any expectations of results. So this is, it says, discard all expectations. It says, even the expectation that, if I practice Lojong, I will be a better person. Yeah, maybe you came to the Lojong teachings with that hope, but you have to abandon that expectation. It says, you should not even have expectation of achieving Buddha to that degree. It says, do not harbor impatience and excessive expectation, even for meditative qualities. For were the demons to become aware of this, they could create obstacles. Now, whether you want to believe in, the actual existence of malevolent forces that are independent of yourself, whether you want to believe in that or not, it's up to you. Of course, in the material, in the context where this text is written, this is accepted, that there are malevolent forces independent of you. And so it says, when you have too much expectations, in a way you open yourself to that. Now, if you don't have this kind of belief, this still applies. What this is saying is, when you have a lot of expectations, right? Then the demons that you summon are the things that don't want you to get rid of them. Those habits. They will begin to try to trap you because you want to be free from them. So kind of your resistance to change, even though you know right now, if you continue on, this is not going to work. But at the same time, there's another side of you that says, but I'm starting to get used to and actually like this misery. If I don't have this misery, what else do I have? See, that is the degree that we are confused, that we even begin to believe that, but this is the mask I'm wearing. And if I give this away, I have nothing else left. So these are forms of demons. And expectation is a big demon. The next one is an interesting one. It says, do not give up poison food. So what's interesting about here is it doesn't say give up poison. It says give up poisoned food. So here it's saying, of course you're not going to, go after poison. If you recognize that it is poison, nobody is going to go for it. So here is saying that it's something that is fundamentally good, which is food. And you need food, right? To nourish you. But be careful not to contaminate food with poison. What is this talking about? It's talking about, as far as our spiritual path is concerned, as far as our training of our mind is concerned, it is very easy that it becomes contaminated with self-interest, self-grasping. Contaminated with mistaken views, wrong views. This is how food turns into poison. The next one is, It's translated here as don't be so predictable. Other translations are don't be so loyal. Yeah, don't be so loyal. When I first read this, don't be so loyal. Our translation, we have don't be so predictable. But I think now, I mean, I've came up with that translation. I mean, not all by myself, based on some other commentary. But now I think actually using the literal meaning there, which is don't be so loyal. It's talking about, it has a sense of like don't be so predictable, don't be so loyal. Yeah. What it is talking about here is keeping grudges. You're like, what? How did you get that? This is about keeping grudges based on your feeling like this person has wronged you, or wronged your family, or wronged your clan, or wronged your village, or wronged your people. So in fact, loyalty often, in the more primitive sense, right? It's about that. It's about holding on to grudges. Because whoever you have a grudge against is someone that you perceive as having wronged you, or wronged those you care for, wronged the causes that you care for. And so then you bear this grudge, you bear this resentment. And this grudge, this resentment, makes you very predictable. Because this is a very primitive not in the sense of like, I'm so sophisticated now. Primitive in the sense of this is such an ancient feeling, loyalty based on having in-group and out-group. And when out-group has offended in-group, then resentment is very strong. So now we are not so clannish. Now we are not so tribal, so to say. Then it's our own grudges, that we have against people, that we're very loyal to those grudges. You just can't forgive. You just can't let go. You just can't forget. Who suffers? Lojong asked this question, who suffers? Have you considered that? Who suffers? When you're so predictably loyal to your resentments and grudges, who suffers? Before anybody else suffers, you suffer. When you can do something to act out your grudge, then maybe somebody else suffers. But you know what? Before somebody else even suffers, you are already suffering. So don't be so loyal. Quite literally, it's saying that. Next, don't retaliate with the agitation of hurtful speech. Gosh, simple advice. You're like, oh, this is not very profound. It's not very profound as an idea. It's unbelievably profound in terms of how often we do the opposite of this. Once we feel threatened disrespected, right? What do? We lash out. And often when we lash out, it's because we are suffering. Someone who is comfortable in their own skin, yeah, don't lash out so easily. It's like nothing you do can change, their state of mind. So if you find that you're constantly lashing out, or constant enough, for some of us, constant enough means, once every month. For some of us, constant enough means, once every day. So don't take other people's, measures, right? Don't take other people as your standard, yourself. If you see that, right, you are lashing out constantly, whatever that constant means, that means this is something that you should address. Sometimes we lash out without even someone knowing. So that's even a more hidden level of lashing out. And I think if you see that, then you have to ask, why? Why am I reacting this way? What's going on? Yeah, because if we kind of investigate and look into it, right? When we lean into it, we'll see that actually, no, it's not about the situation. No, it's not about that person. There's some other underlying unhappiness. And so this knowledge is helpful when other people lash out at us. When other people lash out at us. Recognize that. That's coming from a place of confusion and suffering. So Lojong says, let me turn this inwards and see. Do I have the fault that this person just blurted out about? If I have, thank you very much. You are like my guru, pointing out what I need to work on. Thank you. If you don't have, then, well, no thank you. This is not about me. I don't know what's going on with you, and I'm not going to take it personally. That's hard, not taking it personally. But that's also self-grasping. We take it personally, We think that people, go out of their way to make our lives uncomfortable and miserable. I think that, but then when I look at the Lojong teachings and I go, oh, wait, let's see. I often joke, I said that my consolation about, what I understand about others is that for the most part, I understand that fundamentally, most people are too self-absorbed to be really thinking about other people. That's my own Lojong line, I offer it to you. Maybe it's helpful, maybe not, I say, actually, I think most people are too self-centered to even think about, going out of their ways to annoy me. So even if I perceive this situation to be, like this person, right? Whenever someone insulted us, make us feel bad or whatever, right? We tend to have this narrative. And this narrative is epic. You can have a whole new series on Netflix on it, how they have been working all their lives to that point, right? To that morning, just to make life difficult for us. That's what we habitually believe. But Lojong is saying, find ways to see how ridiculous that belief is. And when you see how ridiculous that belief is, then it's like, oh, no, this is nothing to do with me. Yeah. So I said, actually, I'm quite encouraged by the fact that, people are totally self-absorbed, they have no time for me. Yeah? So whenever I want to play that narrative, build that narrative on how they went out of their way to annoy me, I go, no, I'm not that special. It's enough that you're special to your mom, Other people, just don't worry about it. So don't lash out in retaliation, and then the translation of that. Then don't lie in ambush. That's the other thing that we tend to do. So this is related to that resentment. So you're like, I'm just going to wait for that day and just stick it to them, Don't lie in ambush. Principally, again, from the perspective of mind training, it's not even like, oh, that is negative karma, that is very bad to do, It's the ability to see that that's kind of absurd. Why? Life is really short. And sometimes we have even no idea how short it is. Tomorrow over breakfast, something doesn't go down the throat right. Nobody to do Heimlich. That's it, finish. But even without that, life is still very short. So I think a lot of these, like, don't do this, don't do that, right? Don't relate to the don't do this, don't do that, in the same way as thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. Because if you do this, then you have offended some deity, some greater force. Then that makes you a morally corrupt person. That makes you a bad person. That makes you... This is not the psychology involved in the Buddha Dharma. The Buddha Dharma's framework is very different. The Buddha Dharma's framework, although I have to say sometimes the Buddha Dharma is taught using the framework of a theistic system, that you are a bad person, you're morally corrupt, Now, if that system works well for you, which evidently it does work well for a lot of people, then wonderful. The Dalai Lama says, like, you need to find that system that works best, that makes you a better person, that brings you genuine happiness. So maybe that system works for some. But I dare say, when we are working with the Buddha Dharma in this system, we got to be careful not to, kind of bring in the other system and get it all mixed up. Here, all the don't do this, don't do that, it's really based on having us see the absurdity, the pointlessness of doing these things. To lie in ambush, to retaliate, that's like a lot of time. That's like a lot of energy. Life is really short. You don't want, the tombstone to say hater. Don't lie in ambush. Don't strike at weak points. So this is very similar. Here, it's emphasizing like waiting, for the moment, and then pointing out people's weak points, to humiliate someone, to hurt someone. Again, these are not like super profound words, but they are of super practical application. Because we habitually do this. And we habitually create suffering for self, for others, because we do this. So I'm going to stop here this week. And the way to work with these one-liners, these commitments, these samaya, elsewhere, it says, there are two things to do. Under point number 7, one of the one-liners say, two things to do on a daily basis. Begin the day by reaffirming, reorientating our day towards bodhicitta. Wake up in the morning, adjust that resolve, strengthen that resolve. May this day unfold in such a way, may I go through this day not forgetting bodhicitta in all my actions of body, speech, and mind. Then at the end of the day, review, like these commitments especially. How many of these commitments did I break today? Yeah. Again, you need to look at this not so that you can beat yourself up, for them, but to kind of see, oh, look at that, so how easily I just succumbed to that. And then more importantly, and how heavy that was. How much I've been carrying this around the whole day, just because somebody said something. So there's the story of, from the Zen tradition, 2 monks coming to the river and sees a woman hesitating and needing to get across and can't get across. So one of the monks, told the woman, oh, just, hop on my back. I need to cross too, I'll safely bring you across. The other monk, the whole time was very concerned because the monastic vow said you should not do that. And you should not help someone. Monastic vows doesn't say that. Monastic vow said, like a monk or a nun, in the case if it's a nun, you should not let, someone of the opposite sex like touch, then especially getting all wet, all of that. So this other monk was very concerned, So then they crossed the river, and then the monk let the woman off his back, and the woman thanked him profusely, and they continued the journey. And finally, at the end of the night, they stopped for a break. This other monk, couldn't take it anymore, and he said, how could you do that? You were breaking the vow, all of that. So the monk said to this other monk, said, what? You still carrying that woman? It's like, I left her, like once we crossed the river, but you've been carrying her, the whole day. So this is what happens when we dwell on other people's affairs. Other people's affairs include, people saying mean things to us, people wronging us, all of that, actually, that's other people's affairs. Other people being critical of us, other people. It's their business, not ours. When it comes to our own business. So here is, I think, the crux. It's often because we have not attended to our own business. That's why we're so concerned about other people's business. So back to my point, if you're not comfortable in your own skin, then anybody does, anything anyone does can serve as a trigger. But if you're comfortable in your own skin, if you have looked at your own stuff, I don't even mean like, you have completely purified, you're now Buddha. But just to accept, that's the first step. And so with your own stuff, right? First you have to accept and you say, well, this is the situation. I have this habit. That's already very good. Then you can work on purifying that. But if you see it and then you get caught up in it, and then you start beating yourself over it, you have to stop. To seek to purify the afflictive emotions, to seek to purify self-grasping, also means first to accept that this is the situation. This is what is. But what is not permanent. What is tremendously fragile, can fall apart easily if we don't superglue it together all the time. Stop subscribing to the Amazon, Every 2 weeks you get a new tube of superglue. Just drop it. And let things kind of see the dynamic. Dynamic is one phrasing. The more common phrasing is impermanent. We look at the word impermanent, we always think negative. No, it also means it's dynamic. So that takes us back to ultimate, absolute bodhicitta. Absolute bodhicitta, the training in that wisdom is the training to directly see the dynamic nature of phenomena, of our minds, of everything. And therefore, suffering has no place to land. And with that kind of understanding, it doesn't matter how much suffering you breathe in, it has no place to land. So you can take other people's suffering because there's no place to land within you. You're just taking it away from them. Or you're training to take away from them. But if you really ground yourself in the groundlessness of the situation, then suffering has no place to land. In a way, bad news is, yes, there's suffering. Good news, there's no place for it to land. Now, we are busy building runways for suffering to land. And then we have all these meetings, how to make the runway safer, all the signs need to be clear, all the staff, so that all this different suffering can just kind of land, one arranged right next to each other, like Atlanta airport, the busiest airport in the world. That's how we're trying to manage suffering. This approach is the approach of seeing how suffering only lands because we provided a landing space. But the more we train in absolute bodhicitta, the more there's no place for suffering to land. Of course, the biggest landing is I, then me, then mine. And then when it comes to mine, oh my gosh, so many things. So that's it for tonight. We'll continue to look at these samayas, commitments, in the coming weeks. And then we'll look at the precepts, the guidelines. There it's more along the lines of, and do this, and do that, and do practice this, and do practice that. Samaya, more about, and don't do this, and don't do that, and don't do this, and don't do that. So another way to put them is prescriptions and proscription. What is proscribed is the samaya. What is prescribed is the guidelines that come in the 7th point. Good? So this Saturday is the 4th of July. So in the United States, right, it's the celebration of Independence Day. So it's a good day to resolve to be free from samsara. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Life. So spend a few moments asking, what is life? So here we say, precious human life, with all the endowments and all the leisures. You have everything. You have a life where whatever resource that you need to achieve freedom, you have it now. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of freedom. So use it well, and be a true patriot. Then you can make America great again, I suppose. Please don't wear that hat. It's made in China. Anyway, enjoy the weekend. Be careful. As you all know, coronavirus is ridiculously out of control in the United States. I have a lot of friends, in other parts of the world. I mean, every time I communicate with them, they're just like, what is going on? They're like, the most powerful nation on earth? I say, well, it's what they say. So anyway, be well. I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Dr.